On Christmas morning of 1839, two sets of footprints appeared in the snow behind the Hawthorne estate. They went into the forest. They never came back out. By dawn, the footprints were gone, smoothed over as if the land itself had decided to forget them. The town of Briar Hollow would spend the next 100 years pretending that was enough. Briar Hollow sat quietly in western Virginia, a place where sermons were longer than winters and silence was considered virtue. The Hawthorne estate rose above it like a monument to obedience, stone walls, iron gates, and a chapel bell that rang even when no service was held. Baron Ezekiel Hawthorne was not royalty by blood, but by fear. He owned land, mills, contracts, and souls. His wealth came from tobacco and timber, but his influence came from something older, control without explanation. That Christmas, the Baron returned from Charleston with two girls. They were twins. No one remembered their names, only that they were identical in a way that made people uneasy. Same height, same eyes, same stillness. They did not cry when they were brought through the iron gates. They did not look around. They were gifts, purchased not for labor, but for tradition. The Baron had two sons, Caleb and Thomas, both nearing manhood, both educated in Latin and Scripture, both raised to inherit obedience. In the Hawthorne family, Christmas was not about joy. It was about initiation. The twins were brought to the servants' wing and dressed in identical white garments usually reserved for the chapel choir. That alone unsettled the household staff. White was never worn by the enslaved. The chaplain said nothing. The church ledger recorded nothing. And the twins spoke no words that anyone could remember. That night, snow fell thick and silent. And something ancient, long buried under scripture and stone, opened its eyes. Baron Hawthorne believed in symbols more than laws. He believed God spoke not through mercy, but through patterns, rituals repeated until they hardened into destiny. His family had long maintained a private doctrine, one never spoken aloud, only passed from father to son behind locked doors and shuttered windows. The twins were part of that doctrine. The Baron summoned his sons to the West study on Christmas Eve. The fire was already lit. The room smelled of pine resin, old paper, and something metallic that never quite faded from the walls. "You are no longer boys," he told them, "and boys inherit nothing." Caleb, the elder, watched silently. Thomas shifted, unsettled. He had always been more devout, more obedient to the church than to blood. He noticed the twins standing in the corner, hands folded, eyes forward. "They are yours," the Baron said. "Not servants. Not people. Yours." The sons were told only that the twins came from a lineage unrecorded by God, a phrase the Hawthornes used to justify unspeakable ownership. The Baron claimed such souls could be shaped, bound, and, if necessary, returned to silence. The chapel bell rang once. No service followed. That night, the twins were instructed not to leave the servants' wing. The sons were instructed not to speak of what they had been given, not to their mother, not to the church, not even to each other. Especially not to each other. Yet something changed immediately. Caleb began having dreams of standing in the forest, unable to move, while two shadows whispered his name in perfect unison. Thomas stopped praying. The house itself reacted. Doors creaked open without wind. Mirrors fogged, even when cold. The chapel candles burned unevenly, one flame always lower than the other. And the twins? They began humming. A sound without melody, without language. The staff said it sounded like mourning, but not human mourning. Like the land remembering something it had tried to bury. Behind the Hawthorne estate stood a small stone chapel, older than the house itself. No windows. No records of its construction. Officially, it was a private place of worship. Unofficially, no one entered it alone. The twins were taken there on the third night after Christmas. Not dragged. Not forced. They walked willingly. The chaplain, Reverend Amos Pike, locked the doors behind them. He carried no Bible, only a ledger bound in cracked leather, its pages filled with names that never appeared in public records. Inside the chapel, the air felt thick, unmoving. Candles lined the walls, already lit, though no one had lit them. The twins stood at the center of the stone floor, directly above a symbol carved so deeply it could not be worn away. Two circles intersecting, neither complete without the other. The Baron spoke words no one else understood. The chaplain responded, and for the first time since arriving at the estate, one of the twins looked up. She smiled. Not with joy, with recognition. The ceremony ended abruptly when Thomas collapsed. He claimed later that he had heard his own thoughts spoken aloud, in a voice that was not his own. Caleb, by contrast, felt nothing, which frightened him more. From that night on, the chapel bell rang twice every evening. No one was ever seen pulling the rope. Briar Hollow noticed changes, but named none of them. The mill workers spoke of echoes in the woods. Children refused to walk past the hawthorn gates. Church attendance increased, yet sermons grew shorter, as if Reverend Pike feared saying too much. 2 midwives left town without explanation. A ledger page went missing from the county archives. And every Sunday, 2 empty pews appeared in the chapel, clean, prepared, waiting. The twins were never seen in town, but people began dreaming of them. Always together, always watching, always standing just beyond reach. The town learned to look away because that is what survival required. And the Hawthorne family had survived many things by refusing to see them. On the 7th night after Christmas, Thomas broke. He went to the servants' wing long after midnight, carrying a candle and a prayer he could no longer remember how to finish. He knocked on the twins' door. No answer. He opened it anyway. The room was empty, beds untouched, garments folded, 2 pairs of shoes aligned perfectly at the threshold, pointing outward. From somewhere deep in the forest, the chapel bell rang once, then twice, then stopped, and by morning, the snow behind the estate would hold footprints that never returned. The morning after Thomas found the empty room, Baron Hawthorne did not raise his voice. That alone terrified the household. He summoned Reverend Pike before sunrise and demanded the chapel ledger. The same book used during the Christmas rite. The same one no servant was ever allowed to touch. The Baron turned the pages slowly. Names appeared and disappeared between lines, written in ink darker than the rest. Some were crossed out not with ink, but with pressure, as if the quill had been driven through the page. There were no dates of birth, only dates of arrival. And beside each pair of names, always pairs, was a single word written in Latin. Reditio, return. The twins' names were not there. That was the problem. Pike whispered that the omission meant the ritual had not completed, that something had gone out of sequence. He tried to explain that twins like these were never meant to be owned by 2 different inheritors. They were meant to be kept together. Caleb overheard this from the hallway. It was the first time he understood that the twins were not gifts. They were safeguards. Thomas did not return to the estate. He was found 2 days later in the chapel, kneeling at the altar, alive but unresponsive. His lips moved constantly, as if repeating a prayer no one else could hear. Reverend Pike attempted confession. Thomas spoke calmly, clearly, and without emotion. He said the twins had followed him into the woods. He said they did not walk, the ground moved for them. He said they showed him the place where the chapel stone had been taken from. A pit older than the town, older than the church, older than any map. They were not born, Thomas said. They were kept. Pike closed the confessional door. The confession was never written down. That night, the Baron ordered Thomas confined to the east wing. Guards were posted, not to keep him in, but to keep something else from reaching him. Mrs. Eleanor Hawthorne had never questioned the chapel. She had been raised not to. But when she saw her son bound to the bed, whispering names she did not recognize, something ancient in her broke open. She went to the servants' quarters alone. She found an elderly woman, one of the few enslaved people old enough to remember the land before the estate. The woman did not hesitate. They come from the hollow, she said, the place where mothers were not allowed to keep what they bore. She explained that long before Briar Hollow was a town, it had been a collection site. Children taken, paired, renamed, used to seal promises between men who feared inheritance more than judgment. Twins hold balance, the woman said. Break them apart, and the balance bleeds. Eleanor asked where the twins were now. The woman only shook her head. Where they have always been. Caleb's dreams intensified. He began recalling events he had never lived, standing in the chapel as a boy long before he was born, watching other pairs kneel where the twins once stood. He remembered hands over mouths. Bells rung backward. Names erased. He realized the Hawthorne lineage did not pass through blood alone. It passed through containment. The twins were not slaves. They were anchors. And now, one of the anchors had been disturbed. Caleb went to the chapel alone. The doors opened without resistance. Inside, the intersecting circles on the floor had cracked. Only one circle remained intact. The other had begun to sink. On the 12th night after Christmas, one twin returned. She stood at the iron gates just before dawn. No footprints led to her. She was alone. The household froze. Baron Hawthorne ordered her brought inside immediately. But as she crossed the threshold, every mirror in the estate shattered at once. She looked directly at Caleb and spoke for the first time. "We were not meant to be divided." Then she asked a question no one could answer. "Which one of you did this?" The twin who crossed the Hawthorne threshold did not behave like someone who had escaped. She did not ask for shelter. She did not ask for mercy. She waited. Her posture was precise, almost ceremonial, as if every step had already been rehearsed long before she ever arrived at the estate. The servants avoided her eyes, not out of fear, out of recognition. Reverend Pike was summoned immediately. When he saw her, his hands trembled, not with shock, but with familiarity. "You came back incomplete," he whispered. The girl tilted her head. "No," she replied calmly. "I came back first." From that moment on, the estate felt wrong, like a structure built 1 inch off its foundation. Floors slanted where they never had. Shadows lingered too long. The chapel bell rang at unscheduled hours, sometimes 3 times, sometimes only once. Caleb noticed something worse. The girl's reflection did not always move when she did. Sometimes it lagged. Sometimes it watched him. The following Sunday, Reverend Pike delivered the longest sermon Briar Hollow had heard in decades. He spoke of stewardship, of balance, of sins committed not by individuals, but by systems. He spoke of sacrifices made quietly so the town could prosper loudly. No one interrupted. Everyone understood. When he finished, the congregation stood, not in prayer, but in acknowledgement. After service, a collection was taken. Not money. Names. Families that had benefited from the old arrangements. Landowners. Judges. Founders. Each name was written down and folded into the chapel ledger. The town had chosen remembrance, and remembrance demanded completion. That night, the Baron finally told Caleb the truth. The Hawthorne estate had been built over a containment site, an old practice repurposed by men who feared chaos more than cruelty. Children born in pairs were taken, bound symbolically, and used to seal generational transfers of power. So long as the pairs remained intact, the land remained obedient. When separated, the land remembered. "The twins were never meant to serve you," the Baron said. "They were meant to hold you." Caleb asked where the other twin was. The Baron did not answer. Instead, he unlocked a door beneath the chapel. Stone steps descended into darkness. At the bottom was a pit, wide, deep, and carved with the same intersecting circles now broken above. Caleb understood then. One twin anchored the past. The other anchored the future. And the space between them had always required blood. Caleb refused to participate. He attempted to free Thomas. He attempted to flee the estate. He even attempted to burn the chapel ledger. Nothing worked. The girl watched him quietly. "You cannot undo what remembers you," she said. Thomas, still bound to the bed, finally spoke clearly. "You were always the offering," he told his brother. That night, the girl led Caleb into the woods. Not by force, by inevitability. The trees parted as if they recognized her. The pit waited. At dawn, the chapel bell rang twice. Then once. Then never again. Caleb Hawthorne was never seen after that night. The estate stabilized. The land grew obedient once more. And the girl? She did not leave. She took up residence in the servants' wing, quietly, patiently, as if waiting for something that had not yet arrived. Because completion, it turned out, was not an ending. It was a cycle. After Caleb Hawthorne vanished, the estate did not mourn. It adjusted. Rooms were sealed. Portraits were repainted. A third chair at the dining table was removed without comment. The household learned a familiar discipline, the discipline of omission. The remaining twin stayed. She was not listed in any ledger, not counted in rations, not assigned labor. She existed in the negative space of the estate, present, but never acknowledged. Servants said she aged without aging. Seasons passed, yet her face remained unchanged, as if time itself recognized her authority. The chapel remained locked, but the land outside it flourished unnaturally. Crops grew heavy. Timber split cleanly. The river stopped flooding. Balance had returned, at a cost no one was permitted to name. In 1842, a county surveyor requested access to the Hawthorne Chapel as part of a routine mapping project. He never filed a report. Instead, a fire broke out in the county records office that same week. Ledgers burned selectively. Deeds vanished. Baptismal registries lost entire decades. Only one structure was removed from all official maps of Briar Hollow: the chapel. From that point on, it existed only physically, not legally, not historically. The twin was seen standing near the ruins the night the last document burned. The Hawthorne line did not end. It adapted. Future heirs were taught never to ask certain questions. Christmas was no longer celebrated openly. Twins born in the surrounding counties were quietly relocated, adopted, apprenticed, or disappeared into church-run institutions. Always in pairs. Always recorded incorrectly. The system learned from its near collapse. No more gifts. No more division. The twin remained the silent constant, watching, waiting, ensuring compliance. In 1901, long after the Baron's death, the chapel bell rang one final time. 3 tolls. Residents reported a young woman walking into the woods with 2 children, twins, holding her hands. No footprints returned. After that night, Briar Hollow began to fail. The land dried. The mills closed. Families moved away. The balance had shifted again. And this time, there was no one left who remembered how to correct it. By 1930, Briar Hollow no longer appeared on maps. The Hawthorne estate collapsed in on itself. The chapel stones were reclaimed by the forest. The pit beneath it filled slowly, patiently, as if sealing itself. The last reference to the twins appears in a marginal note in a burned ledger fragment. What was kept has returned. History moved on. But land remembers. And sometimes, in winter, footprints appear in the snow behind where the Hawthorne estate once stood. They lead into the forest. And they do not come back.